From Washington, D.C., this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Hena Zuberi. Our top story tonight. The UN Secretary General says Palestinians in Gaza represent the highest number of people facing catastrophic hunger ever recorded by the UN anywhere, anytime. Speaking outside the Security Council in New York on Monday, Antonio Guterres described a recent UN report on the situation as an appalling indictment of conditions on the ground for civilians. He called on Israeli authorities to ensure complete and unfettered access for humanitarian goods throughout Gaza and for the international community to fully support the UN's humanitarian efforts. Guterres has also stressed that this showed the need for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. He added, "This is an entirely man-made disaster, and the report makes clear that it can be halted."
The Supreme Court unanimously ruled Tuesday that a man's challenge to his former placement on the no-fly list can move forward, finding the government failed to show his lawsuit is moot. Yunus Fikri, a U.S. citizen who previously resided in Sudan, claimed his placement on the list was unlawful and sued the FBI.
Israeli forces have killed at least 93 Palestinians and wounded 143 more over the past 24 hours in 9 massacres in Gaza. This brings the death toll of Israel's war on Gaza to over 31,819 people. 73,934 injuries and approximately 8,000 people missing since the past 5 months. Israeli airstrikes targeted densely populated areas including Gaza City and Rafah, killing 14 people, including children. Palestine's foreign ministry says Israel has begun to destroy Rafah without making an official announcement to avoid international reactions and without waiting for permission. Israel's military says its forces have also killed 50 Palestinians and detained 180 people during a raid on Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital on Monday. A top Palestinian police officer coordinating aid was amongst the casualties. Israel has also announced the death of one soldier in combat in northern Gaza. Israel has so far lost 251 soldiers since it started its ground invasion. Al Jazeera journalist Ismail Al-Ghoul has been released after being severely beaten and detained by Israeli forces. Additionally, Rula Hassanein, a Palestinian journalist, was arrested in Ramallah, bringing the total number of detained journalists to around 60. Approximately 54 Israeli settlers, escorted by heavy Israeli police presence, invaded Al-Aqsa Mosque in occupied East Jerusalem on Tuesday morning, Wafa news agency reports. Al-Aqsa, a revered Islamic site, prohibits non-Muslim visits and rituals as per international agreements. Despite this, Israeli groups backed by authorities frequently breach this agreement, conducting tours and religious activities. Witnesses recounted settlers entering in groups, touring provocatively, receiving explanations on the, quote, Jewish temple and performing rituals near the Dome of the Rock. This intrusion coincided with the 9th day of Ramadan, further aggravating tensions amid restrictions on Palestinian Muslim access to the holy site during the month of fasting. The Supreme Court has issued a ruling that allows lawsuits against public officials for blocking users on social media, but with certain conditions. Only those officials who post about state matters and have the state's authority to speak on its behalf can be sued under the law. The decision came as a result of 2 cases involving officials blocking users on Facebook. It now requires lower courts to determine if blocking users on social media violates their First Amendment rights, applying the Supreme Court's new test. Ex-President Donald Trump's attempts to secure insurance underwriting for his $454 million bond in a New York civil fraud case has been rejected by 30 insurance companies. Unless he secures the bond, Trump may have to pay from his own funds or risk his properties being seized by state authorities. The bond is required following a judgment from Manhattan Supreme Court Judge Arthur Engoron. His ruling followed a civil fraud trial in which Trump was found liable for misleading authorities and banks about the value of his real estate holdings. Despite Trump's claims of a rigged trial, Engoron sided with prosecutors. They had alleged that Trump overvalued assets for loans and undervalued them for tax purposes. Trump's legal team is asking the New York Supreme Court to intervene. His lawyers argue that forcing such a massive bond requirement would cause irreparable harm. Muslim asylum seekers in a New York shelter are struggling to observe Ramadan due to food being served that is not halal. Abdullahi Ba of Guinea, West Africa, says he has to choose between his health and religious observance at Queens Bellerose shelter. Advocates like Kabir Javed have criticized city authorities' lack of support. This is despite requests for equal treatment compared to shelters serving other religious groups. While City Hall acknowledges the issue, it has emphasized collaboration with faith leaders to solve the problem. Analysts say that the asylum seekers' plight reflects the urgent need for equitable access to halal food during Ramadan. Hate crime at Chicago's downtown Islamic Center. Details come after the break. Stay tuned and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Chicago's downtown Islamic Center was the target of a hate crime Sunday night. Worshippers shared how they were entering the mosque for prayers and faced verbal abuse and threats from a man shouting, "All Muslims should die." The perpetrator returned then with an object, smashing the mosque's glass door. The incident unfolded just after 8 p.m. when Muslims in the mosque were breaking their daily Ramadan fast. No injuries have been reported. The FBI is currently investigating the incident. An exhibition in Germany's capital, Berlin, aims to combat discrimination and Islamophobia. Organized by Berlin Islamic Federation, it was launched on March 15th. This coincides with the United Nations International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, as well as the second annual International Day to Combat Islamophobia. The display outside the Maulana Mosque highlights mosque attacks, arson, and racist terrorism in Germany. Islamic Federation President Murat Gul stressed the urgency of addressing anti-Muslim racism, citing New Zealand's 2019 Christchurch massacre that killed 51 Muslim worshippers as a sobering example. Gul emphasized the need for a concerted effort to protect religious institutions and promote diversity. Reflecting on past attacks, including the 2014 arson on Maulana Mosque, he called for a resolute fight against hatred. Gul advocated for educational initiatives and dialogue to foster mutual respect and combat discrimination within the German Muslim community. 13 years since the start of Syria's civil war, protests against the regime of President Bashar al-Assad have erupted. The protests in various parts of northern Syria observed the anniversary of the popular uprising. Demonstrations in Azaz, Bab, Idlib city center, and Jericho, amongst other places, saw thousands chanting for regime accountability and its downfall. The uprising, which began with students' anti-regime graffiti in the city Dera in 2011, evolved into a conflict marked by violence and war crimes. Over 13 million people were internally displaced, and 14 million civilians in need of aid underscore the ginormous humanitarian crisis. Over 500,000 Syrians have been killed by the war. Pakistani military aircraft conducted pre-dawn airstrikes inside Afghanistan, killing 8 people. Interim Afghan spokesperson Zahibullah Mujahid confirmed that strikes hit Paktika and Khusht province. He claimed that the bombing resulted in the death of 8 people, including 3 children and 5 women. Mujahid condemned the attacks as a, quote, reckless violation of Afghan territory and urged Pakistan to cease such actions, warning of potential repercussions. The Taliban, referred to as the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, has vowed to protect Afghan sovereignty and accused Pakistan of harboring wrong policies detrimental to bilateral relations. The airstrikes followed the killing of 7 Pakistani troops in North Waziristan. Islamabad blames Afghanistan for not curbing militant activities, while Afghanistan denies the allegations. Mujahid disputed Pakistan's claims, stating the targeted individual is in Pakistan, and urged a cessation of harmful policies. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has extended a warm congratulations to Vladimir Putin for record victory in Russia's presidential elections earlier this month. In a post on X, Modi expressed his anticipation for further strengthening what he called the, quote, time-tested, special and privileged strategic partnership between India and Russia in the years to come. By securing approximately 87% of votes, Putin clinched an unprecedented 5th term. Russia concluded its 3-day election earlier this month, with results unveiled on Monday. 53 people were killed and injured in an attack on a Rohingya village in Burma's Rakhine state. Residents of Tar Dar were sleeping when a fighter jet bombed the village last Friday. It resulted in 23 immediate fatalities and over 30 people injured, many of whom lost limbs. Tar Dar, which has a population of less than 2,000, is under control of the Arakan army, which is fighting Burma's ruling military junta. It has become a target for the ruling junta's indiscriminate attacks after the Arakan army's territorial gains in Rakhine state, including the capture of Tar Dar. Since last November, the UN reports over 170 civilian deaths and 400 injuries after renewed fighting erupted in Rakhine state. That's all from our Washington, D.C. studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell icon for the latest updates. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.